Today we're gonna science with bugs. Welcome to Comic Misconceptions, a show that takes you into detail about the things you think you know about comics. I'm your host, Scott Niswander. We're back, you guys. We are back, finally. But that trivia question that's been itching on our minds all those many moons ago needs to be answered. And that trivia question is, what Marvel character is Earth's Scientist Supreme? So many of you guys got it right that I'm not even gonna pick a winner this time around. I'm just gonna throw them at the bottom of the screen here, because there's a lot. Good job. And if you're too lazy to read any of those, then the answer is Hank Pym, aka ANTMAN, aka a bunch of other aliases, but we'll get there. There may have been some confusion with the trivia question because I did say Scientist Supreme and there have been other Scientist Supremes, like from other planets or for the company AIM as like a position, like a title. But I did specify Earth Scientist Supreme, and Hank Pym is the only one that I know that fits into that category. And just to be clear, Scientist Supreme doesn't mean the smartest person alive. Both Tony Stark and Reed Richards are both objectively smarter than Hank Pym, but I guess a fair comparison would be like a knight and a samurai. Both of them know their way around swords, but they wield them in completely different ways. I actually didn't research knights or samurais, but I hope you understand what I mean. But if you didn't know, Hank Pym discovered Pym particles, which essentially allows you to shift mass between two dimensions, allowing him to grow and shrink in size. He also has a helmet that he uses to communicate with certain insects, mostly ants, hence the name. So originally these Pym particles were like a potion that you pour over things, and that would change their size, but then they changed it to like a vapor that you inhale, or even multicolored pills that you ingest. Always take the red pill. Eventually, long-term exposure to Pym particles allowed him to change size whenever he wanted because his body it just had a supply of its own Pym particles. Ant-Man never really caught on as big as Spider-Man or Captain America did, and Stan Lee kind of blames this on the artists and not any of his writing, but honestly, if you have a character that travels by catapulting himself long distances only to land in a giant pile of ants on the other side, yeah, maybe it's time for a second draft. I'm sure you've seen Ant-Man's other travel methods though, which is to ride on ants, and this kind of confuses me, just the physics of it. So let's assume, obviously, the Pym particles are real. They work by shifting mass between one dimension to the next, and obviously he's lightweight when he's tiny as well, or else he would crush these ants. So if he has less mass and less weight, how is he able to fling this guy around, like, with no problem? I feel like he wouldn't be able to. He doesn't have super strength either when he's in that form, but super strength was given to him when he was in the giant form, which is why he kind of favored being Giant Man as opposed to Ant-Man. But originally, Giant Man couldn't grow past the height of 12 feet tall, but of course it's comic books, so they found a way around that. However, he does do more intense superhuman feats of strength when he is 12 feet tall, because if he's, say, 100 feet tall, then he's using all of that super strength that he gets to just support his own weight. So many people have taken up the mantle of Ant-Man over the past couple of years. Obviously, you have Hank Pym, but you also have Scott Lang. What a great first name. He was a thief who stole the Ant-Man technology to rescue a doctor who was being held hostage, who was the only one who could save his daughter from a heart condition, and yeah, and he gave it back, but Hank Pym was like, nah bro, you keep it, you're doing good, you do good. You also have Eric O'Grady, who was just a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent who stole the technology, vouched to be good, wasn't, vouched to change, didn't, and so on and so forth. So while others have taken up the name of Ant-Man, Hank Pym has taken up the names of other different aliases as well, including Giant Man and Goliath and Yellow Jacket and even Wasp. So let's talk about Yellow Jacket, because that's kind of the start of a huge arc in Hank Pym's life where he basically went from like awesome guy, everything's going pretty well, to just no, everything's kind of sucking. So here he was, minding his own business, just working in the lab, thinking about how he'll never be able to marry his love, Janet Van Dyne, aka the Wasp, when all of a sudden he inhaled some various chemicals into his lungs, and it gave him schizophrenia. Of course, I mean, like I said, it's a comic book, these things can happen. He then called himself Yellow Jacket, told everyone that he had killed the real Hank Pym, and then kidnapped Janet to marry her. And then to everyone's surprise, she actually said yes to the proposal. I mean, she knew it was Hank inside of Yellow Jacket, she just didn't want to make his condition worse by rejecting him. So they actually really got married. But at their wedding, Janet was attacked by supervillains. Of course, why even have these things? You know it's gonna happen, but Hank Pym was snapped right back into his right mind. And even though the marriage was just to prevent his condition from worsening, they still let it stand. So everything's kind of going pretty well. I mean, he finally got to marry the love of his life. He's back thinking straight. Guess things can only get worse, right? Boy, is that an understatement. Shortly afterwards, Hank realizes that he hasn't really contributed anything to the field of science ever since his discovery of Pym particles. Janet's bringing home all the bacon with all of her success as a fashion designer. Meanwhile, he created this little invention you may have heard of called Ultron that's been terrorizing humanity for all of a long time. So in Hank's mind, he is a failure of a scientist. There was this emotional build-up inside of him that he finally took out on a supervillain, and his actions got a couple civilians killed, so the Avengers had him suspended. So what was his genius plan in getting back into the Avengers? Well, of course, he had to build a robot, because that worked out so well the first time. But this was a robot that had a specific cutoff point that only he knew about, so he would send it to the Avengers to attack them, and then he would come in and save the day and look like a hero, and they would welcome him back to their ranks as thanks. Rhymes. Now, at this point, Hank was already verbally abusing Janet in his depression, and so when she spoke up against his plan, saying it was just a horrible decision, he went around and backhand her in the face. Guys, don't ever do that. Terrible idea. And this is just the start of how things are going bad for Hank Pym. The robot ended up not shutting down to his command, and it was Janet that ended up stopping it. The Avengers finally had enough of him and kicked him out of the team for good and off of the premise, and then that insult to injury, Janet had filed for divorce. And guys, things only get worse from there. He goes broke, he was tricked into stealing a government supply of adamantium, and at his trial, he was rescued by the Masters of Evil as to try to incriminate him as to being a supervillain. He even contemplates suicide. I mean, this guy can't catch a break. But his life is getting better, although he's still created Ultron, who's been a threat to humanity for a very long time, and will be the villain in Avengers 2. But hopefully the Ant-Man movie will capture some of the awesomeness that is Hank Pym. I mean, just look at that costume. Need I say more? But before we go, it's time for that thing that you all crave deep inside of you, the weekly trivia challenge. So this month is the X-Men's 50th anniversary, and I feel like I'm at least obligated to talk about it a little bit. Now, when you think of the X-Men, you probably think of Professor X, and Wolverine, and Jean Grey, probably, and Cyclops, aka Scott Summers. Man, what another awesome first name. Now we all know what Cyclops does, but just in case you need a refresher, normally he uses his visor to channel energy blasts out of his eye holes, but when he's in his civvies, he wears red sunglasses. So this week's trivia question is, what material are Cyclops' glasses made of? Cyclopses? That's plural though. I don't know. Pretty straightforward question. I know you guys will probably get this one in a heartbeat, so leave your answers in the comments below or on our Facebook page or at Twitter at NerdSync using the hashtag ZMTrivia. So get started on the weekly trivia challenge. Sunday. It's Wednesday, actually, is when we'll give you the answer. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Comic Misconceptions. It was a fan-suggested episode, so if you have any topics you'd like me to tackle, leave it in the comments below. Also, we're doing a cool giveaway here at NerdSync, not just for Comic Misconceptions viewers, but for all of NerdSync, where we had a privilege of reading a cool comic called Suicide 5. It has a Kickstarter going right now. I highly suggest you read it. It's amazing. And we talked to the guy, he's a really awesome dude, and he was saying that if you pledge some money to his Kickstarter, any amount of money to his Kickstarter, and you tell him that NerdSync sent you there, then we are gonna have the opportunity to give you guys free signed comic books of his comic, Zombie Highway, which is apparently really hard to get a hold of. I don't have it. I want this prize, but I don't get it, so you guys are getting it, and I'm jealous. But if you go over to his Kickstarter, you can just, like once I said, pledge any amount of money. $15 gets you the PDF of Suicide 5. $5 more gets you the hard copy, which is a great deal, I think. I mean, some of these books back here, like Batman, it's like $25 for a hardcover book. You're saving $5 this way, my friends. Anyway, go do that thing, I said. And cut, edit. There's only 2 weeks left in this Kickstarter, so go do it right now. Don't even wait for this video to be finished. Actually do, because watch time is very important in ranking YouTube videos. But after this, you go to his Kickstarter and you know, pledge monies. Thank you guys for watching Comic Misconceptions. You can subscribe for more videos if you like this kind of stuff, which I hope you do, or else why were you watching this? Also, you can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter at Niswander. I'll see you guys next week for more Comic Misconceptions and more things that you thought you knew about comics. See ya. He was a thief who stole the ANTMAN technology to rescue a doctor who's being held Welcome to Comic Misconceptions, a show that takes you into detail about the things you think you know about science. That's not right. We do comics, not science. I wish we did science. I'm not that smart.